This happened when I was 17. Barely legal to drive, always nervous on the road. For about 2 months, I was living with my aunt in Texas. She owns a pretty big farm with longhorn cows and a ton of goats. She also owns 5 pure white Great Pyrenees. They're very loyal dogs and train very well. She introduced me to each of them, and after a bit of standoffishness at the beginning, I learned to love playing with her massive fluff babies. They were gentle giants with doggy smiles and loved belly rubs. So one day, I'm driving back to her house from a grocery trip, and I notice a big white van has been following me down the long dirt road that leads to her house. It makes my neck prickle, and I hope it'll pass when I slow down to pull into her short driveway, up to the cattle gate that leads to the rest of the driveway and yard. It doesn't. The van slows to a stop and parks behind my car, and I see the figure kind of move around inside, leaning to the side to mess with something between the seats. He makes eye contact with me but doesn't get out of the van. Like the hounds of hell were on my heels, I sprint to the gate and push it open, sprint back to my car, throw up stones driving it through, skid to a stop on the gravel driveway, then leap out of my car to close and lock the gate again. Believe me, I wasn't thinking rationally, only that once the gate is closed, I'm safe. So I latch the gate and sprint into the house, heart racing like a rabbit, hands trembling as I slam closed and lock the door. I peek outside a window, careful not to let myself be seen. There's no one in the van. I see a flash of movement out of the corner of my eye and see a man in a white shirt walking around the side of the house. I freak out because the cattle gate was never opened, so he must have climbed over the fence. My aunt wakes up from her nap on the couch and asks what the heck I'm doing, creeping beside the window like that. I quickly explain, and she gets this dark look on her face. She gets up quick as a snake and grabs the shotgun from over the door. I thought it was decoration, but no, fully loaded. My aunt storms to the back door. We can see the white shirt through the back window, and she throws open the back door, making that shrill fingers and lips whistle. 3 dogs come bolting up from the barn, huge white monsters practically flying across the yard. The other 2 were napping under the porch in front apparently. I was still at the front window and saw him sprinting across the yard. He almost made it to the fence, but the 2 porch dogs had cut across his path and stood their ground, barking in their deep voices and herding him back toward the house. Guy tries to run back toward the house, shouts something, and then gets bowled the hell over by the oldest, biggest dog, who stands on his chest and snaps around his face, snarling and drooling and basically saying, "Just try to struggle, I dare you." Guy smartly goes limp, ragdolling under this pissed dog that's almost as big as he is, while the other 4 circle around, hackles raised, watching him and growling. My aunt strolls up, shotgun ready, and yells at him for a bit. I watch her lower her gun and call off the dogs. Those well-trained buggers back away a few yards and stop making noise, but they're still circled around him, sitting and watching him. I got shivers just watching them, moving like huge, synchronized wolves. He gets to his feet and she escorts him off the property, the dogs flanking silently the whole time. Apparently, the meter reader guys can have strict rules in Texas. She told them to not come onto the property unless they've called ahead, and she's home to personally escort them to the meter and back for their own safety. In my nervousness at being stalked, I totally missed the energy company logo on his van. New guy didn't get the memo or ignored it. Aunt cheerfully told me later that her dogs are trained to chase off or kill cougars. An actual problem she has. Monster cats will drag off her goats and leap 8 feet over her fence, dead goat still in their jaws. The dogs never bit him, just barked and pushed him over and got up in his face. They're trained not to hurt people but would probably fight back in self-defense if harmed. Glad he went limp when he did. In summary, young me was spooked and didn't realize a guy was from the power company. Don't jump people's fences in Texas. People have dogs. Hi everyone, I've been thinking about sharing this experience for a while now but never knew where to share it, or even if it's worth sharing. I think on the surface of it it's probably not that creepy, but it was the first time in my life where I got that, oh, this doesn't feel right feeling in my gut. I was about 5 or 6 years old when this happened, and I'm 31 now but remember it as clear as day. For some background, I lived at the time in a small cul-de-sac in England. At the end of our road was a row of shops, and often people would park at the end of the road when there was no parking outside the shops. There was a row of terraced houses with a patch of grass outside, and on this grass there was a small wall that had a sign on it, just saying that it was private parking beyond that point. This day, a friend and I, both young girls, were sat on this wall facing the end of the road just chatting and people watching. While we were sat there, a red car parks at the end of the road on the right-hand side, probably about 10 meters or so away. A man then gets out of the car. He's slightly older than middle age from what I can remember. Immediately, and I mean the second he gets out of the car before he even takes a single step, he gets out a camera and takes a photo of us sat on the wall. Now this is the late 90s, so this is just a disposable camera. After that, he starts walking across the road, and as he gets halfway across the road, he stops, takes another photo of us, and then keeps going. As soon as he gets to the pavement on the other side of the road, he again stops and takes another photo. Then he continues walking in the direction of the shops. I remember asking my friend what he was doing, but I can't really remember anything else about what we said. I think we just shrugged it off and kept talking about whatever it was we were talking about before. A little while goes by and the man returns, and then he does it again. He stops on the pavement right before crossing the road and takes a photo of us, keeps walking and gets halfway across the road and takes a photo of us, keeps walking and then takes a final photo of us right before he gets in his car. At no point during any of this interaction does he say a single word to us. He never asks to take our photo, says hello, waves, smiles, nothing. Just completely silent and straight-faced in taking photos. At this point, I think we both get this bad feeling. I for sure do, and run inside to tell our parents. I didn't even know what it was that I was feeling being so young. I just knew that this didn't feel good, and my gut was screaming at me that I needed to tell someone about this. I half expected my parents to tell us that we were being silly, but they looked shocked and immediately called the police. I remember the police coming and us telling them this story, and they looked concerned, which again I didn't expect. I knew it felt wrong, but I also thought that because he just left and didn't do anything, and it wasn't illegal to take photos, that we would be told off making a fuss of it. Again, I was only very young, so even though I knew it felt weird, I didn't know why. I remember the police leaving and saying that they would keep us updated, but I don't remember anything happening after that, which isn't that surprising. I'm sure our description of the man wasn't that good, and we didn't know about getting number plates or anything like that. I have thought of this incident on and off throughout my life as a weird thing that happened. Of course, now as an adult, I understand more why it was really weird that this man was taking photos of really young girls than I did back then. Still, I try and rationalize it in my brain. Is it really that creepy? Maybe he just thought it was a nice image, 2 girls hanging out in the middle of summer. But even writing that, it feels weird. But of course, nothing actually ever happened to us. I never saw that man again. We weren't kidnapped or worse. So maybe it was innocent. What makes it hard for me to consider it as a slightly weird but innocent encounter is the fact he never spoke or even acknowledged us. I think it would be super weird anyway for a random man to ask to take a photo of little girls. But the fact he didn't say a single thing was weird. Also, I find it so weird that he didn't just take one photo but 6, like he was trying to get the perfect shot. It's weird to me that I have no idea what happened to those photos. I'd love your opinion on this. Is it creepy or am I just over-exaggerating the situation? Like I said, it ended up perfectly fine. Nobody got hurt. Why do you think this man took the photos? It's the first time I've shared this story outside family and friends. So this was my experience with the big killer clown panic of 2016. I think about it all the time and wonder what would have happened if I reacted differently and wasn't on my guard. I, a 6'2" male, was 16. I had just bought my own car for $1,000 from a buddy and took any chance I had to drive it literally anywhere. So one weekend I have a couple days off work in a row. I decide I'm gonna go drive an hour to the small town I used to live in and see some of my old friends that still live there. It's about maybe 6 p.m. by the time I get into town, and I start calling some of the friends. No one is really answering yet, so I go to my grandparents' house and say hi to kill some time. Well, I'm there for a while and not a single one of my friends is free tonight. I'm kinda bummed. My family is just talking about how everyone is freaking out about the killer clown sightings and whether it's real or not, and I'm over it, so I just decide to leave. Now it's about 8 p.m., just starting to get dark, and I stop at the only liquor/convenience store in town to get some cigarettes. I looked old and never got carded in this tiny crappy town. Except the door is locked and I don't see anyone or any lights when I peek in the door. That sucks, but whatever. I don't need cigs anyway. I do think it's weird though, as I've never seen that store closed once. As I'm walking back to my car, I notice it's weirdly quiet even for this town. It was kind of foggy, so I can't see too far ahead of me. And of course, I have killer clowns on the brain, so I get a little spooked. Then out of nowhere, I see a woman come into view near where the road meets the liquor store lot. She's walking towards my car, the only car in sight, and shouts to me. I can't tell what she's saying at first, but she gets closer and I make out bits and pieces. She is petrified by the rumors of killer clowns. She tells me that 2 kids were just murdered down the street at the high school by one of them, literally half a mile from us. I don't believe her, but keep listening. She asks first if I can give her a ride to her house. Instantly, I say no way. I know this town really loves drugs of all kinds and just don't trust it. She keeps asking and won't leave, so I say, how about this? I'll drive on the shoulder behind or next to you as you walk home. So if anything happens, I'll be there in my car. She says fine and we start going. She's going super slow. I have my hazards on, driving half on the shoulder down the country road as she walks beside my open passenger side window. A couple times she says something like, "Come on, can't I just get in? I'm super scared." And I tell her there are no killer clowns, there's no need to be scared, and I'm not going to risk my safety. She shuts up. After maybe 10 minutes, we turn down a dirt road that ends at a clearing, and I stop the car. She says, "Okay, I see my house from here," and I say, "Cool, see you later." She freaks out and says, "No, you have to walk me to my house." She points to a big old farmhouse about 150 feet in front of us through the clearing. I say, "No, I'm done. I told you I'd help you get home and we're here. We can see your home right in front of us. and it just feels so off. At this point, she gets super weird. She starts rubbing her body up and down, as if to be sexy, and keeps asking please, and implies she'll do something for me that I don't want in exchange. I put it in reverse, start backing up, and she literally puts her arms and ducks her head in my driver window and demands I give her any money I have. I don't have any, so I just shove some change from the pocket in my door into her hand and peel out. As I'm backing up to the main road the whole time, she's just staring at me and not walking toward her house. I drove an hour home and have been thinking about it since. I've always felt like if I walked up to her home, there would be more people waiting to do whatever they wanted with me. Thankfully, I feel like I made all the right choices and made it out with just a spooky story. This story happened 4 years ago, around the time that COVID started, so it was a while back, but still worthy of a post. It was early 2020 and I had just gotten a new job in a small town near my area. While looking for a place to live, my sister offered to rent her house to me. She had bought the house 2 years prior, but she and her husband didn't really take to it, and their commute to work was long, so they moved out and the house was uninhabited. Luckily for me, it was actually pretty close to my workplace, around a 40-minute drive, and my sister pretty much rented it for free to me. I just paid for the water and electricity and looked after the house. I was living there for a solid 2 or 3 months and had already gotten used to it. One night after coming back from work and parking my car, as I walked towards my door, I noticed something odd. There was a cigarette butt on the curb to my house. I leaned down and picked it up, thinking that it might have been mine since I'm a smoker, but after looking at the brand name, I realized that it wasn't mine and threw it away. I didn't think much of it and just shrugged it off as some asshole throwing it at my curb. I went on with my night and nothing unusual happened. 2 days later, I was once again walking to my house when I spotted a few more cigarette butts, this time near my porch. Needless to say, I was pissed off and thought that someone sat on my porch and smoked. But since I didn't know who it was, there was nothing I could do about it. I noticed that they were put out pretty recently, so whoever it was probably walked off as I was approaching. That night I was watching a movie on my laptop and it was pretty late, past 1 a.m., so I was surprised when I heard a car passing by. It's a suburban neighborhood and it was COVID, so people rarely ventured out at night, but I didn't think much of it. Around half an hour later, I was surprised when I heard chattering nearby. I listened intently, but I couldn't hear what they were talking about as their voices seemed almost muffled and quiet. By this point, I was getting a bit unnerved, so I stopped the movie and quietly got off my sofa and walked to the front door to make sure that it was locked. As I was approaching the door, I froze mid-step as I heard the two approaching my porch and reducing their talking to a whisper. I realized right away that whoever this was wanted to break in. I leaned against my front door and waited, expecting a loud bang against the doorknob being shaken, but it was oddly quiet. I decided to walk over to my window to see if they had walked away or changed their mind. My windows have bars from the inside out that you have to unlock so that you could move the curtains or look out the window comfortably. I slowly unlocked the bar mechanism and lifted it up. I moved the curtains and was taken aback. Leaning up against my window was a man. He was as startled as I was because he basically stuttered over his own steps as he jumped back. He tightened his hoodie to cover his face, so all I could really see was his big blue eyes looking at me. His friend realized what was going on and right away started to kick the door in. He kicked it a solid 4 or 5 times, but the door wouldn't budge. All the while, I was staring at them, frozen in fear, and trying to comprehend the situation. I snapped out of it and slammed the bars over my window, locking them and running upstairs to the storage room where I pushed a table up to the door and called the cops. As I listened and expected the two to come inside any minute, I heard a loud crash and the bars from the windows being shaken aggressively when they realized that they couldn't get in. One of them let out a long, angry scream that probably woke up half the neighborhood. By the time the cops came, they were long gone. The police couldn't find out who it was, but were more active in the neighborhood in the following weeks. Regardless, I wasn't keen on staying there, so shortly after I moved out, my sister sold the house a few months later, and as far as I know, nothing similar ever happened since.